And hello there. Let's do a few audio checks. It has been a few weeks. Okay, I think we're good. Okay, I'm showing video and audio and looks like it's on Twitter. So, welcome. Have a sip. Necesito café, which will make a little sense a little later. Today's coffee is by Good Beans Coffee in El Salvador. And there's a nice little coffee shop in San Salvador that is run by a guy named Gabe. And sorry, YouTube is freaking out. And he has hand curated, picked, processed, and roasted coffee that he manages and selects from. It's truly an artisanal craft. And so he does ship worldwide. So if you're interested in some really good premium Salvadoran coffee, it is called The Good Beans or Good Beans. And he's on Twitter. He has a website. And today's coffee, which I've never had before until I bought this, is called a Bourbon. Bourbon is, I guess, what we would say, but Bourbon. Bourbon 300 AMD. I don't know what that means. Finca Via España. So good stuff. Very, very different, unlike any other coffee I've had. So with that, this is a new format that I'm trying to do, resurrecting, rebooting I Need Coffee. And rather than me trying to choose topics that I saw throughout the week, which can be a little bit of a work, I am unabashedly stealing a format from some friends, Nikki and James, who do a live stream. And they do a live stream format that is their week. So what did they do over that last week? The weekend, Monday through Friday, what are the activities? What are the events? Then they highlight a few things. So I am stealing that format in an attempt to be more consistent. And the intro slide or the intro screen showed Fridays around 8:30 Pacific. I don't think I can pull that off. So last minute change, I'm going to try for Fridays, 9 a.m. Pacific, which I'm effectively on time, 6 p.m. Central European Standard Time. I believe that's what that means. So yeah, join me and let's have a good time. So with that, let's start with my weekly project. And weekly projects are projects that I start at the beginning of the week, and we see how much they fade by the end of the week and if I actually make any progress. This is one of those examples, and already my slide is kind of messed up here. Welcome from Chicago. Hop on in. And by the way, there's going to be a Q&A at the end. So again, stealing Nikki and James' format, you can post questions or comments in YouTube, supposedly on Twitter, although we'll see if that works. I'll need to monitor that to see if this chat thing works. And so YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, maybe one person watching me on Twitch, and yeah, I think that's primarily it. So you'll submit a question, I'll see it, and we'll answer them or discuss them at the end. And in case no one submits questions, I will give you questions because I have questions that I don't have answers for. Okay, so on to my messed up slide here. My weekly project, my proyecto semanal is Estoy aprendiendo español. So, as you may know, sorry, my face is covered up on my own screen here. Let me move this. As you may know, I am working in El Salvador to build the ERP Center of Excellence. And every time I visit El Salvador, I feel like a dumb tourist who can't speak Spanish, and it is very frustrating for me. And the people in El Salvador are unbelievably gracious, nice, the friendliest people in the world. But I feel terrible, like being a bumbling English-speaking American tourist who knows 3 words in Spanish. So I am going to try the it seems like a multi-year journey to learn Spanish. And there are lots of ways. I know the conventional methods to learn a language. I've got Babbel, I've got Duolingo, but one of the problems is I want to focus on accent. And I know people who speak quite a few words in Spanish, but they speak with an American accent. And estoy aprendiendo español. Like, it's pretty painful to listen to, even for me. So I found this person, Gabriel, on YouTube, and he does voice coaching and accent coaching for actors, for executives who want to speak with a local accent, and we'll say, an American accent. He just released a program, Complete Spanish Course for Beginners on Udemy, that is for Americans looking to learn Spanish and teaching you Spanish accent so that you can speak without looking like a complete fool, and be better understood. It's not just about having an accent. It's where I can say the right words, but a Salvadoran will have no idea what I'm talking about because I'm just mangling the pronunciation. And so he teaches you the vowels, the consonants, and how those are spoken, how you need to move your mouth differently between an American accent and a Spanish accent. And they're just completely different mechanics of your vocal cords and your mouth and your tongue and how you say things. So great course so far. And so I'm learning A, E, O, U, how to make the sounds, how to move my tongue, how to bring it into the throat or in the front of your mouth and things like that. So very cool so far. My participation has dwindled throughout the week, I will admit, but that's my first step. Rather than learning a bunch of vocabulary and then having to retool the accent, I'm starting with the Spanish accent and then trying to pronounce the words properly or with a passable accent. So anyway, moving on. Oh, wow. Hello from Kampala, Uganda. Hey, speaking of Uganda, what I find amazing is the activity, involvement, participation, user groups, and just adoption of Microsoft and Dynamics products in the African continent. And as I mentioned many moons ago, one of the reasons why I'm doing ERP Center of Excellence in Latin America is because I'm just not seeing it. We don't have any user groups, at least any Doug Dynamics user group chapters in Latin America at all. So Africa is way ahead of all of Latin America. So I'm envious of the amazing progress that the user groups in Africa have made, and I would love to be able to even compete with you guys there. So welcome from Uganda. That's fantastic. Okay, so moving on. Monday, lunes, and I just translated these days of the week, so I'm still learning, so let me know if I'm pronouncing it wrong. So on Monday, lunes, my developer and I had kind of a fire drill because we have an app in AppSource, and we've been busy with other things, and we are working on our pipelines and housekeeping and trying to get things cleaned up so that our pipelines are running regularly, next minor, next major. If you're into DevOps pipelines or ALOps, or ALGo, ALOps for that matter, you should be running your pipelines on a regular basis against next minor, next major. If you are not, please look into this. That's the whole point of a DevOps tool and pipelines, so you're not having to do this manually. So we neglected this app for several months, maybe up to a year, because we're just busy with other things. And when we went to run our pipeline, because we're migrating to a new tool, we got an error, or he got an error on number series management. And we kind of freaked out because this is a breaking change in version 24, Business Central version 24. it is marked, as I now know, it's marked obsolete pending. It's not going away, it's not disappearing, but it is marked obsolete now, and it will be going away in a couple major releases. So you will need, if you are using number series, you need to look into migrating to the new Business Foundation ID 310 code unit called number series. Now, what threw us was that not only was this marked obsolete, the documentation just says obsolete, it's going to be removed in version 24. So we freaked out. Well, it turns out code unit 396 is still present. It has just been moved. It's been moved out of base app into this new Business Foundation application. We couldn't find it. Like we didn't know to look for it, and we didn't know where to find it. So we thought it was gone. So we freaked out, and we had several calls late at night starting on Monday, like, how in the world are we going to deal with this? And thank you to the fellow MVPs who gave me a clue and calmed me down. We did find it under Business Foundation code units. 396 is still there, but we did have to change our code to deal with the breaking change. And we have a plan now to obsolete a few things that we were using and migrate over to the new 310 code unit with version 24. So we've calmed down a little bit, but holy cow, we knew it was going to happen. We knew we were going to hit a breaking change at some point. We just didn't know where that landmine was going to come from, right? Well, we just hit our first landmine. It's like, okay, here's the fire drill. We dealt with it, and we kind of figured it out. And what surprised us was, despite our efforts to try to stay up to date, try to stay current with everything that's going on with Business Central, we completely missed this one. We somehow missed the Business Foundation. I kind of think I was aware of that. I just didn't know the specifics. And I didn't realize, apparently, that number series was being deprecated, had moved, the whole bit. It is so hard to keep up that, like, I don't know what I did wrong, what I could have done better. I'm trying, but man, it was rough. So shout out to anyone else who's having that. And our constant refrain is, if we're dealing with this and we're trying as hard as we can to keep up, how are other partners and customers dealing with this? Like, let me know. Post a comment. Let me know. It seems like a battle. Anyway. From lunes on to martes, Tuesday, martes, I shared a new password cracking table by a company called Hive Systems. And I apologize to Hive. I forgot what services you offer. But if you go to hivesystems.com/password, they will explain the background of the password hashing table or password cracking table, their services, and then you can fill out the form to request their zip file containing all these graphics. But this has been a popular table that you may have seen on Twitter and shared around over the last several years, certainly since 2022. And the problem I had with it was twofold. One is I was highly dubious of the results of the table in the last 2 years, because you'll notice there's some, the word instantly in purple in the upper left corner. The purple extended pretty much all where the red was previously. And so it's like, oh, if you had upper lowercase and numbers with 8 or 10 characters, it was instant. I was like, no, that's not accurate. But I was unable to find their methodology for their password cracking and where they came up with these numbers. But I knew that any decent password hashing or encryption algorithm, 10 characters, numbers, letters, upper and lowercase, even without simples, 10 characters cannot be cracked instantly. So I assumed that had to be NTLM. If you're familiar with the NTLM hash, I don't know the technical details of it, but it is horrible. It can be cracked so quickly on using Hashcat on a competent cracking rig. I just saw the numbers. It's 300 gigahash per second. I believe that's 300 billion attempts per second on NTLM hashes. So if anyone gets in your network and can extract the NTLM hash database from your Active Directory server, game over. They'll take that thing off to their cracking rig, run it for 48 hours, and they'll have cracked 70, 80, 90% of the passwords. So that's what made me highly suspicious of 2024 version of this table. So when I saw, 2022, 23, when I saw the 2024 table, I was like, ooh, something is very different. You could tell instantly because instantly is only in the far upper left corner. 4 to 6 characters, numbers only, lowercase letters. I'm like, this looks much better. And so we see here that, let's say you have 8 characters and you include symbols. You're in the far right column. You're the first orange cell, 7 years right there. So I'm like, okay, this makes sense. This matches the password cracking I've tried. This matches what I've read. This seems much more reasonable. And you'll notice at the bottom, the very welcome addition of these very simple specs for their benchmark, hardware and password hash. Those are critical if you're going to evaluate this. If it doesn't say what hardware and what password hash is being cracked, this is meaningless because you have no reference what the standard is. So this is 12 RTX 4090 GPUs, which is a pretty substantial password cracking rig. That's a 12 GPU distributed cracking. That takes quite a bit of effort to set up and configure. And it is using the pretty well accepted password hash of bcrypt. And that should be used on pretty much all conventional websites, e-commerce. It's a industry standard for password hashing. Password hashing. Is it the best? I'm not sure. There might be something better. You could do different rounds of things, but it is well accepted as being reasonably secure. And 8 characters with numbers, letters, upper, lower, and symbols, 7 years. However, this is brute force. So as the title says, time it takes a hacker to brute force your password in 2024. That's a particular type of password cracking that assumes they know nothing about the passwords, that assumes not a dictionary attack, not what's called a mask attack. There are many, many ways to produce a much more efficient password crack, and brute force is the last resort of password cracking when you've given up on dictionary guesses and things like that. So this essentially would only apply to a fully random password. If you're doing password 123 ! This would not apply because you can have a password lookup table, a rainbow table. You can have dictionary attacks, mask attacks, all sorts of things to catch those easy passwords. And substituting @ symbol for A and 3 for E and 0 for O, meaningless. Those can be cracked in milliseconds, those easily guessable substitutions. So yeah, this would be for a fully random password generated by, say, your password manager. Anyway, I'm a kind of a armchair cybersecurity geek, so that was fun. And also on Tuesday, I redid this podcast and thought about the idea, came up with a weekly format, and this is incorrect. Obviously, I'm going to target 9 a.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. European time. So that's what I did on Tuesday. Okay, and Wednesday, I had to completely reset up and reconfigure the live stream. I have a new desktop, and I realized I had to reconfigure vMix completely, make sure everything was working. And if you've ever worked with a Stream Deck, you know that when you install an update or move it onto a new computer, pretty much the wind blows, it loses or resets all the button mapping. So I had to go in and reconfigure all of my buttons with vMix, reprogram everything, get it working. So I think it's working. We'll see. So that was Wednesday, among other things I did. And a feature of the weekly live stream will be an upcoming event. So if there is a conference, a user group meeting, a webinar, something, post it in the comments, hit me up on Twitter, let me know, and I'll feature the event. And this week's event is DynamicsCon Live 2024. It's going to be in Denver, May 13th through 16th, coming up very quickly. It's at the Denver Marriott Tech Center, and you can go to live.dynamics.com and use discount code SteveMVP15 for 15% off the registration price. So that's a pretty good deal. And yeah, if you're going to be there, I will see you there. And next up, tool of the week. I'm trying different things, so let's see how this goes. I mentioned that we are switching to a new DevOps pipeline tool. We are switching to Cosmo Alpaca. And when it was first released, I believe it was targeting large enterprises or larger organizations that had large development teams and wanted all sorts of enterprise features. But they are now offering kind of a pay-as-you-go piecemeal, just a much very affordable, granular pricing model and feature model. And so we are using the Cosmo Alpaca VS Code add-in and pipelines from them. And it is incredible. It is exactly what we needed as a small team. So if you have 1 or 2 or 3 users that are doing BC development and you do not like the time required to set up a new VS Code AL project for AppSource or PTEs, if it takes you several hours to set that up in VS Code, and if it takes you time to set up a new project in DevOps and get your settings in DevOps, I highly recommend looking into Alpaca. It is a pay-by-the-hour service. The VS Code plugin is phenomenal. It has saved us hours on the VS Code and DevOps setup side just instantly. Like 2 clicks, your project is set up, your DevOps repository is set up, your pipelines are set up, your project structure is set up. I'm not fighting with DevOps permissions anymore. It uses best practices like pull requests, and it basically handles all the structure in DevOps that my developer and I were fighting with manually in the setup. It eliminates all of that for us. So Cosmo Alpaca has been a game changer for us because, which I'll talk about later, if we're doing a small PTE that's estimated for 8 hours, we don't have 2 to 4 hours to spend setting up the project. It was killing us. So this is saving us tons of time and making those 4 to 8 hour PTE requests much more reasonable for us and the customer. We're not like effectively losing money on overhead to get those smaller projects done. So I highly recommend checking it out. Just fantastic. It is not just for big companies. You can just use the VS Code plugin and pipelines and save hours instantly. So I'm a huge fan. It's not perfect, right? You'll find maybe a few edge case limitations, but they've had great support. They've been very good in adding features and functionality that we requested. So they've recently added code signing certificate with hardware HSM backing. So we have our code signing cert in Azure Key Vault with HSM. They've added support for that. So it's seamless. Once it got working, I think we flipped a few switches and our AppSource app is signed via HSM. So things like that, critical, great support. Anyway. Thursday, Jueves? Let me know if I'm saying that right. On Thursday, I worked on that was yesterday. Wow. I reviewed a statement of work and a mock-up with a new developer we're working with. And question for you, which I'll talk about more, is, how do you do your statements of work? How do you do your mock-ups? And I do 2 different things, but in this case, I used Snagit. I take a screenshot of Business Central, kind of the screen that I want to deal with or the page. I say, okay, this customer wanted special notes. Like there's Business Central notes, but they wanted a special note for some reason. And so they said, we want these different notes for different users, for different types of entries. I'm like, okay. So we talked about, because notes are already in the fact box, can we have kind of a custom table for these notes, custom fact box, and it's only on the posted sales invoice page. So you see, I'm kind of annotating the screenshot, doing kind of a mock-up of the UI. So what do you do? Now, I have a friend who is a huge fan of a tool, online SaaS tool called FigJam and Figma. Now, it looks cool in concept for application designers, UI designers, product development teams with a lot of the emphasis on collaboration. And it looks cool in concept. There are tons of tools that do this stuff. But my problem is it's just me, a developer, maybe one of our consultants, and there's no way I'm going to drag them in to use this tool just for these prototypes and statements of work and things like that. Like, they have their own tools, they're busy, they have other stuff to deal with, and they're just like, Steve, deal with it. Do the statement of work, do the mock-up, do the wireframe design, whatever. Just let us know how much it costs. I'll get the customer approval and just get it done. Like, they've got enough on their plate that they don't have hours to participate in design sessions. So although my friend loves this and it can do some amazing things, this feels like overkill for me. So how do you do your statement of work, your design, your mock-ups, your wireframe design, where you kind of need to work through how is this UI going to work? Like, what tool do you use? And another example of how my friend uses FigJam is he is able to quickly mock up these pretty fancy looking graphic UI. So we're both learning Spanish, and so he has these flashcards. And so what he's doing is he's using FigJam to kind of reproduce the content on the flashcard to help him practice Spanish. So this is probar, to taste or try. So I'm going to try the bread, and so he's basically using that tool to mock this up graphically in an electronic format. So anyway, how do you guys do that? So on Thursday afternoon, I attended a webinar by Black Hills Information Security. And if you're not familiar with BHIS, if you are anywhere, if you are at all interested in cybersecurity, information security, computer security, anything like that, pen testing, you name it, I highly recommend putting Black Hills Information Security, BHIS, on your radar. They're an amazing organization with tons of free webinars, tons of free information security training. They have formal trainings that are what they call pay what you can. So some people in some countries, and maybe they're students, they don't have any money. So they can attend for free. You just email them, say, look, I'm a student, I'm broke. Can I attend your cybersecurity operations basics training webinar? And they'll say, sure. Whereas I, who can afford it, I'll pay the $800 for the 2 or 3 day training because it is an amazing value for me at that price. And so I happily contribute to that to supplement the people who are attending for free. And they will have thousands of people attending their training classes. So I highly recommend you if you have any interest in cybersecurity. Amazing organization. Moving on to Friday, Viernes. Again, accent. I'm trying to learn pronunciation. So, today is Friday. What do you know? So I'm doing a live stream, trying to get that every Friday, 9 a.m. Pacific. I have a long overdue statement of work for a custom list page for a customer. Again, it's maybe 4 to 8 hours tops, but I got to do a statement of work, and I become the bottleneck for that. So how do you deal with that? I'm going to have a meeting to discuss the BC new sales pricing experience with my partner, Tanya, but also with another BC partner who we're helping out, how their customer is using BC pricing. They want a customization, and we're trying to figure out, okay, can they even use the BC pricing? Does it meet their needs? And then they want a customization on top of that. How do we make all these pieces work? Because the BC new sales pricing experience can get moderately complex. There are several layers to it: customers, items, price lists, discounts. So you got to figure out how do all these items play together. And then the customer on top of that has their own kind of odd way of doing pricing and price levels and discounts. So we're trying to figure out how to get that to work properly. And then I'll have a meeting with my partner about NDAs, subcontractor agreements, and lawyers and legal stuff. And then a plug for Saurav Diani. I think it is every Friday morning for me, every Friday evening India time, he has the BC Open discussion. This week, which it's actually at 8:30 Pacific time, I think it's 9 p.m. India time. This week's topic was What's New in Business Central 2024 Release Wave 1. If you cannot attend his meetings, which you can go to that QR code to go to his website and register to get the invite for his Teams meeting for BC Open Discussion Live. If you can't attend, check out his YouTube channel. I think he has over 4,000 subscribers on YouTube, Saurav Diani, and he posts recordings of all those meetings. And every meeting is a literal conference presentation grade session with prepared slides, prepared topics, prepared code samples, walking you through it, demos. Like literally, it is a master class of Business Central content. I highly, highly recommend attending it. And when we were doing our fire drill on the Breaking Change with Number series, my developer found one of his videos on the Change to Business Foundation. And Saurav's video is one of the keys to help us understand, oh, this is what happened. And helped us decipher and kind of reverse engineer what went wrong and what we missed. So check it out. Okay, so Q&A, post some questions on YouTube, Twitter. I'm seeing comments from YouTube. Let me check out Twitter, see if anyone has replied or asked a question. Okay, not yet, but that's a thing. Post a question on Twitter. I think you'll reply to the live video. I'm not entirely sure, or maybe you click on the live video and you can enter a comment. No idea. I need to test it. And otherwise, you can hop on over to YouTube, post a question, and I will see it in this little chat thing. Okay, and we have an excellence update, a weekly update of ERP Center of Excellence. I'll probably be doing separate videos on the ERP Center of Excellence Twitter and YouTube channels, but I'll do a weekly update here. And this is a quick update on what I'll call the Berlin English Academy. And this is not Berlin, Germany. This is Berlin, El Salvador. And this is where our program is based. Our office is located. And this is the training room in the Berlin Community Center. And we have Edgar at the back with the headphones teaching an English class to Edgar, Daniela, and I don't know the woman on the far right there, but they are doing an English class to review the weekly activity that they did in the English Academy that they're attending. So, okay, post a link to the YouTube channel. So my YouTube channel is youtube.com/Steve Endo, all one word. So let me just type that. That's a good point. One moment. I'll put that in the Q&A in, actually, let me put it here. Let me see if I can do this. youtube.com/Steve Endo. So that's the impromptu version. Home, red. Okay, so there you go. So youtube.com/Steve Endo. I am seeing the Twitch. It looks like that's coming through. So Twitch or YouTube, those comments are working well. Not sure on Twitter. I'll need to figure that out. So that's the Berlin English Academy, and Edgar and Daniela are attending a 10-month intensive, very intensive English program where it's every single day for 90 minutes. So they're doing that every single day, huge commitment. So we are sponsoring them with a scholarship to pay for that English Academy. So that's part of what we're doing for ERP Center of Excellence in El Salvador. In addition, I am developing the training classes. So we are building a training class, learning a program from scratch. If you've never heard of the word variable, if you've never written a line of code in your life, this is the learning a program training that we are doing for people in El Salvador for ERP Center of Excellence. So Gerardo's going through that. We're using Replit. He's learning Python. And hello, Klaus. Thank you. Twitter comments are working. Thank you, Senor. Muchas gracias, Senor. So awesome. I'm seeing the Twitter comments. Send some questions. Make them easy for me. Okay, we're going to have Q&A at the end. So I am creating multiple learning curriculum programs, training programs. One of them is learning to program from scratch. So Gerardo has never programmed in his life. He is learning Python. He's learning variables and strings and data types and casting and all sorts of things. So in this lesson, we did string interpolation, conditional statements, and data types. So it's a 100-day Python program on Replit, and we are supplementing this with hours and hours of how to program content. And so when Edgar and Daniela have time, if they're interested, they're 19 years old, and when they know enough English, they can go through this as well. So it's like drag a person off the street, we can teach them how to program from scratch. And it'll be totally self-paced program with videos and supplemental content. I am also creating a curriculum on business processes. So I initially thought, oh, I'll just teach Business Central. Well, then Tanya, my partner, says, well, they kind of need to know accounting. I'm like, ooh, good point. Okay, we'll do accounting classes. And it's like, well, accounting exists in the context of business. And if they've never worked in a business, they've never done sales or purchasing or inventory or accounting, how do they understand the context? I'm like, okay, let's take a step back. So I'm now doing business process training. We're going to do purchasing, sales, inventory, basic accounting and bookkeeping so that they understand, okay, what is a purchase quote? What is a purchase requisition? What is a purchase order? What is a receipt? What is a purchase invoice? What is a payment? What does that entire purchasing business process look like? We're doing the same thing for sales. Sales quote, sales order. We'll have inventory fulfillment or order fulfillment, shipping, warehousing, sales invoice, collections. What are all the debits and credits that occur throughout all of those processes? So that's what the business process training is going to include. And then we're going to have Power BI training. So we have a need for Power BI for Business Central. So we're starting from scratch. Never heard of Power BI? No problem. How do you launch it? How do you use it? What do the buttons mean? What is the terminology? Because Power BI is a very funky proprietary term for everything. It's not a pivot table. It's like a slicer or whatever. So there's a different term for everything Power BI. So this is lesson 2, transform data with Power Query. I scoot up. Anyway, you get the point. So we are having training from scratch. A person walks into the training center in Berlin there. If once they learn English, then they can start to do these classes here. So that's what we're working on in Berlin for ERP Center of Excellence. And I'll be doing more updates for that organization on the ERP Center of Excellence, which I'll broadcast that when it is ready. So next up, let's see if my slides work or if I screwed it up. The weekend. El fin de semana. El fin de semana. Semana? Not semana. Semana. And if you're familiar with this meme, this is Daniel Craig on Saturday Night Live. And I believe he was actually announcing the musical group The Weeknd, or the musical performer The Weeknd, but it turned into a meme where it's like, hey, welcome to The Weeknd. And he just has this resigned look like finally The Weeknd. So ladies and gentlemen, The Weeknd. So last weekend, I went on a harbor cruise with my wife, sponsored by her employer. So sure, we went to the Long Beach Harbor, went on a nice boat, had some food and drinks and music, and had a great time. And as we toured around the Long Beach Harbor, we got to see the Queen Mary, which is gorgeous at night, and especially from the harbor, quite a sight to behold, just phenomenal ship. Right. And apparently there are all sorts of shows and activities and events you can attend on the ship. So I'll check that out. Someone mentions on YouTube, Power BI is now part of Fabric. Okay, good point. I have no idea how to keep up with Microsoft's renaming Olympics. I swear the marketing team, they must have just a full-time evil henchman whose just full-time job is to rename everything to make it impossible for us to keep track of everything. And so I'll look into that. I've heard of Fabric, but I'm calling it Power BI. So Power BI for Business Central, for mere mortals, that's my focus. Yes, the Queen Mary instantly makes you think of Titanic. I'll have to look it up. I don't know if Queen Mary is bigger than Titanic or not, but yep, it's got those big smokestacks or steam stacks or whatever they are. So yeah, very cool looking ship. And I actually had lunch there for a Long Beach organization years ago. It's beautiful. They have a really nice restaurant there where you can host weddings, activities, conferences, you name it. So I'll have to check it out more. And a weekend would not be complete without some chores. So my joke is that once a year, my family cleans the pool, whether it needs it or not. And whenever I say that, it looks exactly like that. And it is the green swamp because we keep the pool cover on all winter and it's a major hassle to get out there, take the pool cover off, clean it, and try to keep up with it when we're not using it. So we just kind of let it sit, and every spring it's a massive endeavor to clean it up. So that is my 13-year-old daughter who knows how to clean and vacuum the pool. So she's out there with her noise-canceling Bose headphones that she loves in the rain, vacuuming the pool. So, yep, that's both of my daughter's chores is to maintain the pool. So that was phase 1 last weekend. We are on to phase 2 this weekend for a second vacuuming, filter cleaning, and trying to get the crystal clear water. If you own a pool, you empathize with that struggle. Okay, so on to the final slide, Q&A, and thank you for attending. Q&A, my question for you: how much time do you invest in a statement of work for a Business Central per tenant extension? This is my question to you. Customer says, hey, we want this customization of Business Central. You say, sure, happy to help. Like, great, we'd love to do that. Well, you may know that this is not so cut and dry because a very common thing that we get is, hey, we want a list page that has X, Y, and Z. This list page is kind of close, but it doesn't have these columns. Maybe we want this fact box, who knows? And you're like, oh, no problem. But then you're like, oh, well, we need to talk to the customer to understand what their requirements are. What do they want? What are they asking for? Why? Is there a better way to do this? How many fields do they want? How many tables are we going to pull from? You said fact box. So what do you want in the fact box? Do we need to add stuff in the fact box? Is that custom? Right? So you can't just say like, oh, great, you want a list page. We'll go off and build that. You need to know what you're building. So how long does that discussion take? Is that 30 minutes, an hour, more? How many people do you need to talk to understand what this list page request is? Is that billable? In your organization, is that discussion for a request for a PTE to get the requirements and understand the design and how it's going to be used, is that a billable discussion? That's question number 1 for you. I want to know. I honestly don't know if we build that. I think we typically have not built that. But the problem is that incentivizes us to have a shorter discussion, right? Because I can't spend 4 hours non-billable doing a requirements analysis and gathering and do a design for something that's a 4-hour PTE, right? It's just not economical. So how do you weigh the requirements discussion, the design process, against a PTE that may only be 8 hours in Business Central? Question, let me know. Next up, the design session with a consultant and developer. So now it's the customer asked for this. Maybe you need a functional consultant to understand the BC functionality, and you need your developer to understand the technical components and how you're going to design this. Is that billable? Is that 30 minutes? Is that 60 minutes? What if the developer says, this might be tricky. I've never done that before in BC. I've never customized notes in a fact box on a list page, something I'm literally dealing with. And we thought, we've never done that before, red flag. And I spoke with a developer and he's like, you're in for some potential trouble here because that is one of those weird dark alleys in Business Central. Like, so we can't just say, hey, customer, that's going to be 8 hours and be confident. It could be 16 hours. It could be 20 hours because there's a landmine down that path, right? Where you can't do X, Y, and Z in a fact box with notes on a list page. If you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. So do you bill that design session? How do you account for those hours? Because if you try to skip it, you're in trouble. I guarantee it, right? The one time you skip that design step and you validate things with your developer, he's going to come back and say, or she is going to come back and say, you're in trouble. I'm sorry, I can't do this for 8 hours. 16 hours minimum. Boom, you're in trouble. Okay, so a comment. Statement of work hours can be later included in project management hours. Yes, if it's part of a larger project, potentially. And so that's a good point. If you're doing an implementation, plan for some time to do the requirements, design, and estimating for PTEs. Great idea. What if it's an existing customer? They say, hey, I just need this new list page. How do you account for it then? Yes, you'll need project management hours, which we do in our statement of work. Let's say the developer says it's 12 hours. We will include time for project management, testing, review, deployment, all those other things, which I'll get to in a few points. So yes, how do you account for this process so that you're not just giving away hours but you're at the same time investing time in this statement of work and design so that you give a customer an accurate estimate and you're not ending up spending 3 times longer on the development than you would have thought because you skipped design. So next up, do you document business process, requirements, proposed design, and scope in the statement of work? Well, you might say, of course you do, but guess what? All of this takes time. This is not a 15-minute exercise. And you're like, okay, what's the business process surrounding this request for a PTE? What are the business requirements? What are the technical requirements? What is your proposed design for how you're going to achieve this list page? The customer wanted data from 3 tables. How are you going to do that on a list page? And by the way, something we learned, if you're combining multiple tables on a list page, there's a side effect. Filtering doesn't work on certain fields from your non-base table, if that makes sense. We're like, we didn't know that because we've never done a multi-table list page. So now we're like, So yes, documentation is time consuming. Customer has to approve. But this is all in the SOW. And the customer's like, what do you mean you're going to bill me to give me a proposal for 8 hours? It's the challenge. So there is a happy medium. I understand the customer's perspective. I'm not going to bill the customer 16 hours for an 8-hour SOW. Would I love to? Yes. That way I would have this perfect design, prototype, all the requirements, everything, and it's smooth sailing for those last 8 hours. So, okay, what we essentially have to do is for that 8-hour PTE, maybe that's just the development time, it turns into a 16 to 20-hour statement of work because to do it right, you need those discussions, you need the requirements, you need the design, you need the scope, you need the statement of work, you need the testing, you need the deployment, because you're going to test in a sandbox. What if you have a deployment issue? What if there's a conflict with another PTE or a third-party ISV solution, right? Game over. You got to account for these things. So anyway, how do you invest? How much time do you invest in a statement of work for a PTE? It's very easy to say, what are you talking about? That's no big deal. That gets you into trouble. Been there. And then finally, how do you estimate that total effort for the PTE requirements, design, development, deployment, testing, documentation, refinements? Because the customer says, hey, I love your list page, but we're missing these filters on these fields because those are added tables that you joined in. You got to account for that. Anyway, that's my question. And the kicker is, what if the PTE is a single list page and really the development is less than 8 hours? How do you account for all this other time? And if the customer goes to another partner and says, hey, these people are going to bill me 24 hours for this list page, the other partner, strategically, they're going to say, they're ripping you off. That would only take us 8 hours to develop, right? Because that partner is only accounting for the development time. They're not wrong, but they're walking in with all this documentation, and sure, they can bang it out in 8 hours because they have all of the context. It is a very common, I don't know that it's malicious, but it's a very common strategy where you or another partner are given an entire statement of work, a budget, everything laid out, and you're like, these numbers are insane. Well, because you have all of this information at your fingertips, and the unknown unknowns for the other partner are now known unknowns or known knowns for you. So anyway, I always provide an average estimate plus low and high range. Yep. Yeah, it's the best you can do, right? Anyone who comes to you and says, it's going to take 16.5 hours exactly, I'm sorry. I know that is not true, right? So 12 to 16 hours, 16 to 24 hours. And the challenge, as I recently spoke to someone, a developer, the challenge is if you have a 4-hour task, sometimes that's all you need. But you run into a problem and you come in at 8 hours actual. The customer freaks out. You're charging twice what you quoted. But if that were a 120-hour project and you came in at 124 hours, they wouldn't blink their eyes. Like, no big deal, right? Just because this percentage is proportionally so much smaller relative to the total cost. It's still 4 hours either way, but 4 to 8 hours is catastrophic. 120 to 124 hours is trivial, right? So anyway, think about it. Open to feedback. Hit me up on Twitter. Happy to discuss it. Oh, I see my head is covering that. I will need to work on that formatting. I'm normally pretty good, but let's see. And there we go. Okay. So sorry about that. There we go. Okay. So with that, that was the Q&A section of the I Need Coffee Weekly BC Review. So I hope you have a good weekend. What are you working on? What are your PTEs? How do you estimate your statement of work? Something to ponder. Okay, cheers. Have a good one. Adios.